My big thing is I look for bad faith actors is my big thing is if like you're acting in bad faith. So if I post something and like I don't have any problem with negative feedback,
Yeah.
but like if you're just immediately shitty or if you just take like the worst, like the most bad faith interpretation of what I said, I'll just usually block immediately.
Mhm.
I also like I'm pretty liberal. I will literally sometimes when I'm bored, if I have nothing else going on, and if I see just like a really particularly awful take that like I will just go through the likes and block.
What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovcik. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health, and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty and physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass. Okay? All right.
All right, everybody. This is In Liberty and Health, episode 182. I should have looked at the fucking numbers beforehand. Anyways, Jose Galison back with me today. How you doing, dude?
Doing good. Glad to be here. What's up, man?
Yeah, man, nothing really. I want to say the last time you were on, it was about episode number 83 for me, and it was with you and the Tower Power guys, and we were chopping up on Elijah Schaefer because he was saying that there's no libertarians that get censored on social media.
Yeah, no, that is pretty silly.
Yeah.
I may or may not be on like my third account. I say may or may not because I don't even know what the hell is going on with Twitter because I still don't even trust it. I still see people getting suspended or nuked or whatever. But I mean, I do see it does seem like a lot less people are like losing their accounts entirely. So I don't know, but it's still kind of like dicey territory. So I don't know what kind of heat I can get for ban evasion. So we'll see. And I'm already. It's like seems to be every time I get to like 3,000 or like 3,500, I get nuked, and I'm like, fuck. And I'm almost back there, so I'm at like 3,200, a little under it right now. So
Yeah. So has there been any signs that you're going to get any of your old accounts back? Because it seems like most other people kind of got like their OG account back. No luck for you, unfortunately.
well, here's the thing with mine. Like, for one, I haven't really tried. And every time you make a new one, I think you have to use a new email and like a new phone. And I don't even remember what email and phone I used for the first one. So it's like, I don't even really know how to appeal the first one. And then the last one, I don't even remember what I got hit for. Maybe it was something that was like, it was one of those things that like I should have known better. Like, but it also was one of those things it shouldn't have been nukeable in my opinion. Like if I was at a, like it wasn't something that was like, I was threatening violence or anything like that. And it wasn't anything too overt, but I wish I could remember specifically what it was. It was something dumb, but it also is the fact of like I don't remember how like the email, so I don't know how to appeal the first one. But then the second one I had, it's like I have appealed like a couple times, I think, but it's like, and I know a lot of people say it got theirs back as they appealed and they appealed and they appealed and they just kept doing it, and eventually they got it back. But for me, for the second one, it's like I've appealed a couple times, but like I guess part of my thinking too is like I think I got hit for ban evasion. So it's like my argument was like, no, I wasn't ban evading. So it's like I don't see that getting back. And I just haven't put that much effort because it's like when it happened, I was at a point where it was like, well, by the time I likely get it back, I'll probably be almost back to where I was. So it's like, what's the point? And I'll have like a better ratio because like it's like every time I come back, I like kind of come back stronger and like have a slightly better because another big thing with Twitter is like having a good ratio of like followers to following type thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty much like a follow back whore. Like pretty much if you don't have a profile pic, I usually won't follow you back unless I've noticed like consistently we interact. Then I'll usually end up following back. But or if you just look like an obvious bot or some sort of like, fake type thing, then I won't follow back. But so like it's really like to get that big difference between follower and followings for me. It's like it's just because I get flooded and I'm not able to follow everyone back. But now it's like the way I do it is kind of like if I haven't followed someone back and I notice you're actually interacting with me pretty frequently, I'll follow you back. Just because it's like, I don't know, I don't really care. I'll follow. It's like whatever. Like it means nothing to me, if anything. But I also, on the inverse, I'm super heavy with the block. So it's like, But I'm also, even with that, I'm super liberal about unblocking. So it's like, because I'm willing to, whatever. If someone was like, hey, that was a misunderstanding or my bad, but now if they're like, that almost never happens. It's very rare. I've had a couple times where I unblock, but it really is just as simple as like, my bad, I don't know what I did. Can you unblock? And I'll usually unblock. But like 9 times out of 10, it's just like, oh, look at this idiot blocking me. What a piece of shit pussy. And I was like, okay, well, I guess you just stay blocked. Like,
you know what? I think you were kind of a little bit of a motivator for me when I started kind of hitting the block button. I think the first time that I really went on and started blocking people a lot, I think I was sticking up for Tom Woods because there was some Liberty thought stupid fucking 304 that was going after Tom, calling him a groomer and said, oh, well, you guys are all about wood chippers until it comes to one of your precious podcasters. And then I said something to the degree of like, I too take my life advice from a woman who sells her asshole on OnlyFans for $5. And like, everybody came in and I usually give it like my rule's like 3 tweets, and if I just see you're not going to like give any ground, you get blocked. That's usually my rule.
I mean, my big thing is I look for bad faith actors is my big thing, is if like you're acting in bad faith. So if I post something and like I don't have any problem with negative feedback, but like if you're just immediately shitty, or if you just take like the worst, like the most bad faith interpretation of what I said, I'll just usually block immediately. I also I'm pretty liberal. I will literally sometimes when I'm bored, if I have nothing else going on, and if I see just like a really particularly awful take, that like I will just go through the likes and block. And I don't know. I also, for me, I like it too. Like when someone, like I've had times too, especially where people like, I've had a handful of times where people will come after me for some dumb shit, and I will see like a post where someone like shits on me or whatever, and like it depends on how they do it. Like I say, if they're like, well, here's why I disagree with this, blah blah blah. If they're just like, well, look at this fucking faggot, I bet he does this, and I bet his dick's small, or whatever the thing is, then I'll just go through the likes and block, and then I'll like see like who retweeted, and I'll apply a little bit of like logic. Because I know sometimes people will retweet not to like endorse it, but just to like sometimes, if anything, just to be like, look at this idiot. So I mean, I'll use logic, but I'll just block like crazy. I don't care, and then it just makes me. I find it funny later when then someone will like post be like, look at this weak guy who blocked me, and I'm like, I don't even remember doing that. Like I had someone who did that, and they can't remember what they said something, and then someone showed it to me, and I don't even remember what it specifically we were talking about, and then I took the screenshot and replied to it, and it wasn't even something too inflammatory I said, and then they were like, look at this guy shitting on me behind a block, and it's like, yeah, like for one, she had blocked me first, and like no, I remember what it was. No, that wasn't that. She said, she was like, oh, look at this guy who blocked me, because she had said something about me, I guess after I blocked her, well after I blocked her, and like she's like, look, even the little bit of criticism he blocks, and I was just like, I remember being like, I blocked you way before that. That was not why, and I don't even remember why I blocked you. So, I guess they found my screenshot in the wild somewhere and then shared it, and then found out I blocked him and assumed it was because of their take, and I was like, no, I already had you blocked. I guess I was right once again.
Do you ever like just see you're unable to view this person's account and then realize that they blocked you? Because that's actually happened to me quite a few times. I'm like, I've never even fucking interacted with this person. I got like an alt with a lot less followers, and like I'll go over there on the alt and I'll just look my name up and there's stuff. I'm like, I've never even interacted with this person. It's actually crazy how many people I see have had me blocked and I've never even talked to them or interacted with them.
I'm fine with it. I mean, yeah, I do see that. I don't care. I mean, like, I'm not the
No, I
guy that's
don't
like,
either.
look at this
Yeah.
person blocked me. If anything, I'm like, thank you. I prefer you just block me. Like that's like, because if you don't like me that much, I don't want to interact with you either. So like,
Mm.
if anything, I don't even mean that in like a hateful way. It's like the genuine thank you. Like, cool. Now we don't have to interact. I'm fine with this. If you clearly find me that abhorrent or whatever, then cool. That you just saved me the trouble of having to find this out later. So I'm good with it. I mean, I will block back once I figure it out because I mean, sometimes to be blocked, you gotta have it both ways because
Yeah.
people can like look at your shit behind it. But you know, whatever. I appreciate that. If anything, I'm like, thank you. The only time that I wouldn't say I don't like it, but it kind of every once in a great while it would be someone that I'm like, oh, like we've interacted before and never had problems. Those are the ones I'm like, okay. Well, and if anything, I'm just like, well, I guess I just read them wrong. I don't know, but that's very rare. I feel like I'm usually a pretty good judge of characters. So, but yeah, no, I don't know. Yeah, it's I think it's good to block. I mean, personally, I mean, if like, I mean, you can have your own system of who, and why to block, but I mean, at the end of the day, if it's social media and you don't have to interact with these people, and if there's someone that doesn't bring you joy, you know, or someone that you don't want to interact with, why would you keep them around? Like it doesn't like why would you keep that as a possibility to interact with? It doesn't make sense to me. So
Yeah,
it's like,
I had
yeah.
somebody kind of like bust my balls once for blocking people, and like I remember telling them like you don't even take up like any mental faculties of mine. Like you guys are
Mhm.
freaking out because I blocked you. It's because like I don't care to see your shit takes, and I don't care to have you seeing my stuff and bothering me. Like you don't take up any mental capacity of mine. So like,
Yeah.
and you guys are freaking out about one interaction that we may have had where I decided to block, and like you know like you said, you're a very, very liberal blocker. I'm pretty reserved about it. There's a couple people that I like know personally that I muted because they were taking things out of context and just being complete and total assholes about stuff.
I
But
don't think I've ever muted. Just immediate block. I just don't see the point in it. If you're at a point where I want to mute you, it's just kind of like, well, I don't want to interact with you. Like, I don't know. Unless it's like the only time I could see muting someone is maybe once I mean, there are occasional like people that I'll have that are weird reply guys, and not in like a negative way, but in like a way that like they just say weird shit that I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it's like I don't want to like block them because it's like whatever, they're interacting on my posts, but at the same time it's kind of like you're kind of weird. Like so it's like I don't want to keep seeing this. So if anything, like yeah, I could that's the only time I could think of maybe I would ever mute someone, just kind of like someone who's interacting with my stuff and isn't necessarily being negative. They may even be positive, but in just the most weird off the rail type ways. Those would be the only people I'd probably ever mute because it's like whatever, I'll take the algo boost. I don't care. And also, I guess in a certain way, it's cool that you're like for some reason attracted to me in that way. I don't know. But yeah, there are. I mean, those are very rare. I've only probably had maybe like less than a handful of those. So,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
pretty sure I have a gay lover on my Twitter because he's complimented me quite a few times. And like I'm pretty sure every single time he's gone after me like that, like I don't want to say in a good way because that makes it sound fucked up, but he complimented my eyes or something like that. I'm like, yeah, my wife likes him too. He's like, yeah, I could see why she's hot and you're attracted to him. Like, okay, bro, like
Dude,
I'll
I just
just
flirt back. I actually have a bad tendency of flirting with like gay dudes. I don't know why. I like it's only if they send it. Well, actually, I guess I take that back. It's not only if they send it my way. I've also initiated before, just because I don't know. It's funny, and like I've done it before with my wife, like right next to me, and she'd be like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I'm like, "I
mm.
don't know. I just figured I'd make their day." Makes me laugh, and I get a little bit of flattery back to me. It's nice.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, we all kind of do gay stuff over here and there. It's just kind of is what it is. We all make dick jokes and stuff like that. So, I guess kind of moving on from Twitter blocking and gay stuff. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and I've been listening to yours, is the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot. So I think I've made it through about 4 out of 6 videos. I listened to most of them today. But before we get there, Marjorie Taylor Greene said that there were 6 billion, and then she adjusted it down to 6 million people crossing the border
Sounds a little
as of
high.
this. I'm glad you knew where I was going with that. But yeah, the Gretchen Whitmer plot, that was really fascinating to me because from what I've picked up from it, there were literally more feds and informants than there were actual people like plotting to do anything. And you could perhaps enlighten me on this. I would probably wager that there were probably no sane people, as in like not feds or informants, that were thinking like we could actually kidnap the governor. Like
Yeah.
I think most people probably thought like that's not going to end well.
Yeah, no, from I think it was something like 12 or more informants, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong. But yeah, they were, I mean, that's what I believe was like kind of sort of confirmed. I might be wrong. So don't quote me on that, anyone out there. You know, I'm not an expert on it by any means. If anything, I would actually suggest people go to like Radix Verum is who I use for most of my stuff. And I know Julie Kelly's good on it too. I haven't really followed much of her stuff aside from seeing a few Twitter posts here and there, but she's a huge account that has really been big on it. I know Radix is, you know, she's not as big on Twitter as Julie Kelly. She's got a large YouTube channel though. I want to say she's like somewhere in the 10 to 20K range. She's just got a good sized channel. But yeah, she's done in my opinion, from the actual stuff I've looked into, Radix, you know, specifically on her Substack, particularly, she's done a lot of great work there. I mean, she's done good stuff on her YouTube as well, but like if you're really trying to dig into it, like her Substack's great. But that's kind of where I use my primary. That was like my primary source was her mostly. But yeah, she's great on that. But yeah, no, it's nuts. It really is like, even of the actual people that weren't feds, like from the most, all the digging I've done, I haven't been able to find a single thing that they did wrong, in my opinion. Because it's like you assume someone, when you hear about something like this, even from our perspective, that there was some loose, small grain of truth somewhere. But like, no, like even the most like unhinged of them all, which would probably be like Adam Fox, still wouldn't even like really go with it. Like he'd goof off and kind of feed into it a little bit, but then whenever it actually came down to it, he'd be like, "What? No!" Like they were trying, like even something as simple as like the feds were trying to give these guys like $5,000 gift cards to use. I think they were saying they were to use to get like gear and stuff.
That's
and I
glowy.
think, yeah, and I think none of them accepted. And like even Adam Fox, being, you know, the context with Adam is like he was basically homeless. Like he lived in the basement of I want to say like what was a laundromat? No, a vacuum repair shop, I think, something like that. Yeah. And like it was just because like a friend let him live there. Like he basically, like he had gone through a rough divorce, basically lost everything. He was in a really weird spot in his life, kind of basically was like smoking, like was always like ridiculously high. Like he was just not in a good time in his life. And even then, being at the lowest point in his life, he still was like, even as something as simple as like taking a $5,000 gift card, he was like, no, like he didn't. So like it really was like they tried to hem these guys up and they didn't get anything.
So. Yeah. Yeah, I heard about the story about the feds kind of infiltrating that, but I didn't realize it was like that saturated with federal informants, you know, going after the governor. So I guess one of the follow-up questions was, or for me would be like, how encompassing was this? Like, do you think Governor Whitmer was actually in on the plot, or do you think this is maybe higher up? Like, how widespread do you think this was, or do you think it's just kind of like more of a concealed operation?
That one's kind of hard to answer. So far as Gretchen Whitmer, I have no idea. I haven't seen anything to imply she was. I know she made some statements, I believe, for the court to kind of be like, hey, you need to get these guys. So, but like, I don't know. She literally just could have just been buying into it and just be as simple as that. I don't necessarily think there. I mean, I don't necessarily think there was anything conspiratorial there. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was, but I haven't seen anything to suggest that. And the things she has done, nothing about that is really like suggestive of that. Like even if I'm trying to like just, you know, for looking for implications at all, like nothing. Like so far as like how far it went up the chain, I don't really know. I know one of the big things is I think the top dog like Fed guy, like it was kind of like up the chain, that was like kind of the head of that like office. I believe he also ended up moving to ended up being head of the office over in like DC, and basically kind of was orchestrated, or I guess not orchestrated, but I guess it probably really did orchestrate, but essentially was head of a lot of the stuff during the time of the January 6th stuff. So, I mean, that's highly suggestive, although it's not conclusive.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't really know exactly. I definitely haven't dug in that much. And this is one of those things that is still kind of newer. So there aren't as like, when you were looking at something like the Whitmer thing, there's a lot less like damning evidence so far as like in that aspect, as opposed to something like, I don't know, like OKC, because that's been around a lot longer, a lot more information's been collected, put together. So like, yeah, with the Whitmer thing, the kidnapping thing, it's more like we can tell at least that they are innocent, but so far as like a conspiratorial, who did what, who's responsible for this, the best we can really tell is that the informants were definitely pushing things, and at the very least they are responsible for driving this whole thing. But like so far as like higher ups in the chain, I don't know. I mean, it really could be as simple as I would suggest to everyone go check out the book Terror Factory by Trevor Aronson, because it kind of gives you an understanding of how informants work and why they would be like this. So it really could just be as simple as the feds kind of had this idea of an op they can pull, and they got informants, and it really could just be as simple as the incentives that drive informants is what kind of caused this. I don't know. I mean, it also could have been their handlers, the feds themselves, that kind of drove it. I mean, that would be, I think that's likely personally, but it could easily just be as simple as the informants, because the informants have a lot to gain from this. And like, I can't remember which one of the informants, but one of the informants in like a 6-month period essentially made like the economic value of over like 6 figures just by being an informant.
Yeah.
So like that is a very clear-cut incentive, and when they actually get convictions, a lot of times they will get more money too. So they are very much driven to accomplish these things. I mean, hell, there are people that there have been examples of people who are essentially career informants that like make their living off of that, where they'll go from one thing to the next, and it's predatory and it's pretty gross. But at the very least, usually most of the time with these things, there is usually some grain of truth. But like, that's what is weird about this one. It's just like there wasn't even, and when I say grain of truth, I mean like they will usually like completely provide the means, the opportunity, the plans, everything, and the like, say they'll be like they'll find some guy who's expressed not liking the federal government or something, and then lo and behold, this guy comes out of nowhere and be like, hey, here's these plans you could execute, and here's these bombs, and here's the money, and here's everything. We just need you to push this button or whatever, essentially do this simple action, and we've arranged everything else for you. And they do it, and then lo and behold, either they stop them before they do it, or it's a dummy or whatever, and they apprehend them after. But like, so like, there is a case to be made that there is like some level of fairness of like, okay, you got me, of like, well, like theoretically this guy would have done it, and like had these not been feds and been some other people, this guy clearly would have been responsible for these things, and he clearly did a bad thing. Like, that definitely is a bad thing to do that. I mean, I think it's predatory, and there definitely is like, you definitely created the crime, but there's definitely a fair argument to be made that, hey, this guy was going to do it. Now, I think it's a little bit of a misuse of the criminal justice system to literally essentially go out creating criminals, essentially
entrapping people.
Yeah. Entrapment. Even though there, like I said, there's a fair argument. That's semi-fair. I just think that's a little bit weird way to use the criminal justice system, have to go out and create criminals, because likely that person, most of the time they find them at times and they're low in their life, to where, like, who knows, they may have in a month or so gotten a job, got their stuff back together, and been in a completely different mindset, and never even think about doing something like that again.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a little break from the show real quick to tell you about the show's sponsors. I am now working with the great Stephen Fox to bring you Fox and Sons coffee. As you can see, I got 2 bags right here, or for those listening, I was holding 2 bags. It is organically roasted up in Michigan. If you're a caffeine addict, much like myself, then head over to foxandsonscoffee.com to get yourself some of their fantastic coffee. They got a light roast, which I'm holding in my hand. They have the Electric Boogaloo blend, which is fantastic as well. I just had it this morning. And if you're like me, you like dark roast coffee, which kicks you right in the freaking face first thing in the morning. They have that for you as well. So head over to foxandsonscoffee.com, use code Kyle, Kyle, to get yourself a little discount. Let them know that I sent you, and get yourself caffeinated, get jacked and tan, and do what you got to do. All right, guys, back to the podcast. Thanks.
They were just at a really low point in their life where they'd be willing to do different things than normally.
Right.
So, I mean, it's gross, but like in this situation, it's like distinct in that like even like they didn't, like they just like didn't. So that's what's like weird. And like it really was just like the feds grasping at straws to make this stuff work. And even the convictions they did get was like they had to essentially create like a kangaroo court to where they completely made it. So like they restricted like what the defense could use for argument, and then they like essentially loaded the opposition or the state against them, where they would let them use stuff down to stuff like personal Facebook messages, not even stuff that was like in group messages with like other people. So like they were able to they had like a completely stacked the deck against them, and like that was how they basically landed those. So it is very gross, very predatory, and it in this case it's like I can't even make the slightest like the slightest bit of an argument for them. It's just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, some of them also had to take, or they didn't have to take, but they did take plea deals. And the one person was being even like preyed upon by a woman, essentially. And this is kind of like a little pattern I've kind of noticed, that the government will literally hire like underage women, which is the most like bizarre thing in the world, because sex work is illegal. And look, like I'm not out here praising sex work, but it's literally illegal to do as like a regular individual. Like if you and I wanted to go out and start fucking fat chicks or something like that and getting paid for it, we'd be arrested. But the government will literally hire underage girls to go get preyed on specifically by older men, or maybe even older women sometimes, and then come in and set basically entrap these people after they've kind of set them up. Like I never hear people really talk at it from that angle, but that's kind of like the most disturbing thing to me, is that the feds will literally set up underage girls and then put them in a predatory situation where they could literally be in danger of being raped or killed.
Yeah, no, it was wild stuff. Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that specific aspect with the like that. I mean, usually it's my understanding, typically when they do those type of things, they just pick of age women that just look really young, typically is what they do. And I don't know, once again, that's one of those things where it's like there's a fair case to be made, that it's like, okay, I guess theoretically if this actually was a 13-year-old or whatever, they would have done it, but you're going out essentially creating crimes, and there's just something weird about that just doesn't sit right with me, and how they're going out of their way to I don't know, future crime essentially, like yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'm all about fucking getting pedos and shit, but like I don't know, something's just weird about that. I mean, don't get me wrong, when these people get busted, I don't really have much sympathy, but it's like, I don't know, is that really the best use of our tax dollars? I don't know, maybe not. I mean, in that case, maybe I'm a little bit more sympathetic when it is like a Fed trap to catch a possible pedo, but like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, dude, it's really, really strange. But so the other thing that you did a series on, and I like know absolutely nothing about this other than just kind of what I've heard, is the OKC bombing. So I know it had something to do with Timothy McVeigh, and then of course your legendary now Terrence Yeaky didn't kill himself. I guess let's kind of start. What is the official narrative for the OKC bombing? Let's start there, and then we'll kind of work our way, I guess, to where you are now, because I know you had an episode, I think, coming out either like today or tomorrow on it.
Yeah, I already recorded it. It's available for patrons. I mean, you're dropping it Tuesday, so that doesn't really matter, but It will drop tomorrow. Or for those watching it, it will already be out because you said you're gonna drop this on Tuesday.
Yeah.
The official narrative is basically that Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols. I guess Terry Nichols more taking on like a material support type role. He wasn't actually there for the bombing. He had an alibi. He was gonna. And when I say alibi, I'm not saying that to mean he was there. I think he actually wasn't. I'm just saying he wasn't there at that time. And I do think that's true. He essentially, Terry Nichols, one of the big parts of his roles is he robbed an individual named Roger Moore and got something like 70 plus guns and a bunch of precious metals and cash and stuff like that, which was then likely used to help fund the attack, essentially. And he was like the material support in that way. I mean, he definitely probably did other things as well to help McVeigh and had an ongoing relationship with McVeigh in this regard. But McVeigh, the official narrative, is McVeigh then took a Ryder truck filled with, I forget, it's basically a fertilizer bomb, parked it in front of the Murrah building, and kaboom, and blew up the Murrah building. It's kind of simple as that. I guess then after, he gets caught, busted somewhere. I forget. I think he had a truck without any tags on it, and he got arrested for that. They weren't actually they didn't immediately suspect him as the OKC. The bomber. I think they actually almost let him go before they got a call to like, oh shit, we're looking for this guy, and then they got him. And that's so basically, in a sense, like I know it's kind of confusing because a lot of people call it lone wolf, but then a lot of people are like, well, there was Terry Nichols, okay, but like like you get what I mean, like he was like lone wolf and like he basically did all that himself.
So what did they say his motivation was, and what is this Murrah building that you're referring to? Because like I said, I'm walking into this pretty ignorant. Like
the Murrah building was like essentially like an ATF headquarters of some sort. I say headquarters, but I don't mean like it was. I'm not saying it's like the ATF headquarters. I don't know how many ATF individuals were in that building, but it was a federal building with ATF people inside. Well, although incidentally they weren't actually there during the bombing, which is convenient. Murrah building was another question there. You just asked what the Murrah building was.
And then McVeigh's motivation.
Oh, his motivation. Yeah. His motivation is at least how. I mean, this could be legit. It might not. It's like who McVeigh is and what he was doing is kind of up in the air. But like the official narrative being he was kind of the militia type who was upset about Waco. Because he was actually, there are, I believe, photos, or it might even be a video of him actually at Waco. He was at Waco during the whole siege, so he definitely was someone, and he expressed, multiple times how like what they did was wrong, and being upset about that. And he was a militia type, and he also was kind of loosely associated with like white supremacist groups as well, like legit ones, and not in like the liberal way where they say that dumb shit. Like legit like white supremacist groups, and so that was his motivation, is that he, at least the official narrative is that he wanted to take, essentially get them. He wanted to get back at the feds. And so he blew up a federal building, which the big thing in it is it had a daycare in it. And, McVeigh was aware of that. He actually scouted out the building before, even went to the daycare, was asking questions and stuff, pretending like he had kids. So he was aware that there was a daycare, and he still did it anyways, So that was the proposed motivations, that he wanted to just blow up a federal building to kind of get back at the federal government.
Okay. All right. So I guess let's kind of take this one step at a time. So supposedly his background's a little shaky as well, because I remember hearing you cover this briefly, that it may not be that he was just this straight up militia white supremacist guy, that there may be, maybe some Fed activity, like he may glow a little bit, if you will. What kind of is going on there? Like this would almost suggest that maybe it was like a false flag or something like that. So could you elaborate on that perhaps a little bit more?
The aspects of that, to where that comes from, I will say the only source of that we have confirmed, and these are confirmed sources, are from his own words or writing. So, like it's not confirmed elsewhere. So you have to take Timothy McVeigh's word to take the angle of him being a government agent. So I'll put that out ahead of time. So, take that with what you will. those out there, whether you believe that or not. I think once you start looking at the larger context and some of the other stuff going on, it makes it a little bit more plausible and less like maybe he's just a crazy guy. I mean, he also could just be a crazy guy. I mean, if I found out tomorrow that there was confirmed evidence that he wasn't some sort of government agent, I don't know necessarily what kind of evidence could prove that. But let's say we did get that somehow, it wouldn't completely rock my rock my world or be that big of a deal. It's not necessarily like integral to the whole the whole story that like me and Richard Booth have kind of like laid out. It still is more to the story than just McVeigh, even if he was a legit avowed white supremacist militia guy. And it blew up a federal building. There's also other actors that were clearly likely feds and or just straight up clearly feds, and that likely kind of like we were talking about with the whole Whitmer thing, that kind of were kind of trying to manipulate people even if he wasn't. But anyways, I digress to go back to him. Essentially, the official narrative of McVeigh's life story. Here's the official narrative: is he was in, I believe it was Desert Storm, Gulf War, whatever. He served then in the Army, and he then decided he wanted to go Special Forces. And this is still part of the official narrative. He went Special Forces, went to the training. He had already been deployed over in the war or whatever. And the official narrative is that when he got to training, he just couldn't keep on because he kind of hurt himself. And like he messed up his foot or whatever, which is actually a pretty believable story. Anyone who's done any sort of Special Forces or something similar training, I did 11 years active duty Air Force. When I first joined, I actually joined as like something that was kind of like in that vein, and we had to like ruck around with like 70-pound rucksacks, and like we would go on like 10-mile hikes in the woods and like crazy terrain through streams and all sorts of stuff. And if you had bad feet, it would be like if you'd hurt your foot, or like say you like broke a toe or anything crazy, that would really limit your ability to do something like that. So it's believable. But then he essentially washed out of that training and essentially got discharged from the military, and he went home. Now, what he told his family, I want to say there's letters to his sister. I want to say there's some sort of correspondence, whether it was through just through talking or letters to his, I want to say his mother. I might be wrong on that one, but I know for a fact his sister. And then also these are things he told his first defense attorneys. Is that what happened is he essentially that is not exactly what happened. He did go to Special Forces training, and then they pulled him aside and they said, hey, we want you to essentially go off the books and do like kind of another sort of black ops type stuff. And they told him, like, this is, once again, these are things he told his sister and his defense attorneys, and I want to say his mother, but I'm not 100% on that. But he would be, the official story would be that he tells everyone in real life, and what like the operating story is that he hurt himself in training and then he got out. But like I said, what really happens is he is going to essentially do black ops type stuff for them. And like one example he used, like he was told he was going to do, is like he would likely do stuff like kind of assist the feds in like drug smuggling operations, which I've brought this up before in my series, that I think what makes it a little bit more convincing is that when this happened, it was like the mid-90s. And if you were to like, then when he was saying these things was in the mid-90s. So to say that, like, I don't know how, I'm assuming you've probably delved a little bit into the conspiracy world. And so I'd assume when you hear someone say, oh yeah, feds drug smuggling okay, yeah, that's a thing. That's a known thing. Like feds, it's basically confirmed. If it actually is straight up confirmed that the feds have in the past done drug smuggling operations to fund their off the books operations. But in the mid 90s, that wasn't like the public consciousness state at that point. It wasn't like this thing of like confirmed. So to be saying that in the mid 90s was kind of like, what? Like what the fuck? Like it was very kooky. So like, and now we know, oh, that's legit things they've done. So that was one example of things they said he'd be doing for him. I forget if there was anything other, but essentially, yeah, he was going to be doing off the book stuff for them. And then lo and behold, he ends up in Elohim City, which is a white supremacist, like, stronghold, like militia type stronghold or compound. And, he ends up getting mixed up with these people, and then ends up blowing a federal building, which, like, I mean, Like at that time, the militia movement was very strong. And if you look at this from a bigger picture, he completely discredited the militia movement of the time by attacking citizens. So, and children, and like completely made them an unsympathetic group at that period in time, because the public backlash from Waco and like Ruby Ridge was pretty strong, and he really did unite those acts really did unite the militia groups and stuff to where they were very strong at that time. And something like a Timothy McVeigh really did hamper that energy. And so it's not that crazy of an idea that, I mean, I guess it is a little bit crazy that the feds would want to interfere with that in some way. Now, do I believe this? I lean towards it, but like I said, I wouldn't be blown away if it wasn't the case, because there are other individuals in the mix that are very much glowing, that also could just have been controlling from the outskirts. But I just have a hard time, and the sources to me are pretty strong, because like I said, his defense attorney, his sister, and I want to say other family members. So I mean, it seems a weird thing, and I want to say might also be like other inmates he was saying stuff like this too while he was in jail. So it's just weird, like, and it's just kind of uncanny that he'd be saying those sorts of things. So not confirmation, but it kind of is convincing for me. But like I said, not necessarily integral to making a case for, at the very least, a cover up, if not some sort of false flag at some level. Yeah. Whether he was doing it because he, was a Fed of some sort, or because he was an avowed, a militia guy who thought like this was what they need to do to get back at the federal government. Either way, same effect.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, first of all, I want to say that I admire that you're not dying on a hill either way, because I think a lot of people, especially in our movement, will want to die on conspiracy stuff and with like little to no evidence and say, this is it, this is the way it is, rather than saying like, hey, this is what the evidence looks like to me, and this is what I think, and this is my speculation. I just admire people who are at least intellectually honest about stuff like that, and will at least present, reasoned evidence, rather than just saying this is my stance and there's nothing else to it. So the other interesting part about this is that you said conveniently nobody was there. So you said there's a daycare in that building and there were ATF agents, and both of those were empty?
No, the daycare was there. The ATF agents didn't make it to work that day. And here's the thing that's weird about that is, according to them, the official narrative is they had, I want to say, some sort of like training exercise or something is what they said. But on the in the aftermath of the bombing, there were live camera crews there from news people covering it, and there was one individual, I don't remember his name. You could probably go back in the series. I bet you Richard Booth probably spouted off the exact name, the exact news station, everything. And if you go to libertarianinstitute.org, you can go to their OKC archive, and you can probably search for it yourself if you'd like to actually see the documents that corroborate this. There was an individual who was getting interviewed by the news, one of the newscasters there, and he was essentially looking for his wife at that period of time, and he said that he saw one of the ATF agents they knew there in the aftermath, and he's kind of like, it was one ATF agents. And he's kind of like, where are all the other ATF agents? And he's kind of like, or something along those lines. I forget the specifics of what they said. And the guy said to him, they all got a pager to tell them not to come into work today. And that was what, and so that is something that was on the news, like streamed live. So, I mean, take with that what you will. I mean, I find it a little bit fishy that they didn't show up. Training exercise seems a little weird, a little convenient. So there also was bomb squad sighting. I want to say it was like something like 7 a.m. or something like that in the morning. So it seems that there was some sort of prior knowledge somewhere at some level. Now, I don't know specifically how or why or who, but it seems somehow some agency had some suspicion something was going to happen, and they didn't alert everyone. And they just let the ATF know to get the hell out of there. and because, like I said, they had a bomb squad there. So, I mean, and to some extent, that does kind of imply that the ATF themselves may not have been responsible, but they at least had some sort of prior knowledge, and yet still chose not to alert everyone. which is kind of gross that they themselves would bail. Because the bomb squad sighting, like I said, it implies it likely wasn't of their design, because they clearly had a bomb squad thing. Were trying to look for it because they suspected it. They essentially probably had some sort of bomb scare somehow got tipped off and didn't show up, and yet didn't tell everyone else. So it seems to be, whether that was some interagency communication of some sort, I don't know. But it definitely is highly suggestive. I know there was lots of aspects throughout the case of like where there were like changes in dates, changes in times of when they were going to do it. So it could have been something as simple as that. That was why they had the bomb squad earlier. I don't know.
Yeah. So now I guess this is probably a decent pivot then. Who all so who died in this bombing? And then I guess you could probably intuit from there, or move on to Terrence Yeeke and what his involvement was. So like, who were the victims in this bombing? Because obviously it wasn't the ATF agents, because they conveniently got a pager that told them not to come into work that day.
Well, I mean, the kids of the daycare. I don't know who all worked in that building. It wasn't just the ATF in that building, but there were, I can't remember the exact body count of it. You probably could Google it real quick, but it's
Sure.
I know it was before 9/11, it was the highest the highest body count like terrorist attack in the United States ever prior to 9/11. So like, it was a lot of people. There were a lot of people in there. Sure, office workers, all sorts of people, but
the number I got on Google, sorry to interrupt, was 168. The bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City on April 19th, 1995 was the deadliest act of homegrown terrorism in U.S. history, resulting in the deaths of 168 people. A day after the bombing, FBI released a sketch of a suspect who rented a Ryder truck in Kansas. So that was just real quick Google search when you type in OKC bombing deaths. So sorry, go on.
No, yeah, you're good. Yeah, so like, there were plenty of other people working in that building. I mean, there was probably a whole lot of other different things going on in there. I don't know specifically what groups, but I know so far as like 3-letter agencies, that pretty much it was ATF, and they weren't there. It was all the other people that were in there. So I don't know what other aspects of stuff was going on in that building so far as business, or maybe they were other, some sort of government workers of some sort. They could have just been supportive, or like support staff to the ATF. I don't know specifically. I just know the ATF weren't there, and the kids basically were. So that was like the big thing people point to, is the kids all the time.
Right. Okay, so then what was Terrence Yeeke's involvement with this? Because what I'm getting from this is that he was, if I'm interpreting this correctly, that he was a cop on the scene, and then he reported that what he saw was different than what the news was saying. And then mysteriously, he also all of a sudden had information that would lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton, which you know how that ends.
Yeah, no, he was one of the first responders. He was a cop. He saved 4 or more people. I believe he kind of fell through some of the floors in the building, and he ended up kind of injuring himself in the process while trying to save people. I don't know specifically what his injuries were, but they were basically not severe enough to where he was able to leave shortly after. Like, he actually was kind of rushing to get out of the hospital, which was kind of a aspect of it. He already was flustered when he got picked up by his ex-wife, Tanya Yeeke. She was who picked him up from there. She was the mother of his children as well. I believe he had either 1 or 2 daughters. I always forget. I want to say 2, but for some reason I hear people say he only had 1. I think it's because there's a picture that goes around where it's him and his ex-wife and 1 kid. So I think that might have just been an older picture. I don't know. I think he had 2 daughters. But either way, he was one of the first responders. Injured himself, got out of the hospital. One of the first things he said to Tanya was, "It's not what they're telling us." And he was never really explicit, gave too many details to Tanya. I would suspect, especially when I've kind of looked into the details of this, he kind of laid a little bit more out to some other people, but not too much. But it seemed to be he probably didn't want to get her involved because, once again, he was the mother of his children. I think he knew there was issues there. There was definitely heavy implications that, and I guess probably even a stronger word than implications, to where it seemed to be his police department was trying to get him to go along with the official narrative, and he didn't want to. The one aspect is, I guess and I think this was in a letter to a friend of his. He said that he told the chaplain, which I don't know, I know anyone who's been in military probably knows what chaplains are, how they operate. I didn't even know, honestly, chaplains were a thing in the police force, but I guess they are. I would assume they probably serve a similar role in the military. They're essentially like they're religious leaders of all different sects. Usually, most military bases try to keep, try to have the best representation of all of them they can. I mean, within reason, because there's so many damn religions. But they're also kind of like a mental health counselor in a way. They're like someone you can go talk to, and the whole point of them is they're not supposed to be able to talk to your supervision and stuff. They're not supposed to be able to tell anyone.
Confessional.
Essentially, it's supposed to be somebody you can talk to if you're having issues, and you don't have to worry about them telling anybody else. And that chaplain, essentially, according to Terrence, told basically everyone the stuff he said. Now, he wasn't explicit about what he said, so like he didn't lay out exactly what he said, but it seemed to be he was questioning things. I do believe he said something along at some point. I don't know if this was to his ex-wife or to his friend in the letter. I will say, if those who want to check out the sources, once again, obviously you can go to the Libertarian Institute, or you can go check out part 7 of my OKC series on No Way Jose. That's the name of my podcast. If you go to part 7, that is the one that we specifically of what really happened to the OKC bombing is the name of the series. But part 7 is where we specifically talk about Terrence Hickey. And if you go to the video description, I put an article in there that's probably the best source you can possibly use. And then also that it lays out like all of this, so all the different sources, and it's also got good footnotes, and it lays out all its sources and stuff too, and it's great. So anything I'm saying is pretty much you can probably find there. But okay, crap, I forgot where I was going.
The confessional. Basically, yeah. he told that person kind of what he saw, and then he basically blabbed, right? He let it all out. That's yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then I was saying what he told his friend. Crap, I lost my point. Gang, I was on a flow and I forgot it.
That's okay. I remember you saying that he didn't tell his wife very much because he didn't want to get her involved. He went to this confessional. I can't remember the word that you're using. Yeah, and then he blabbed on him. And when he was in the hospital, he gave a note to his friend.
Oh no, it wasn't specifically in his hospital. I don't remember what point he sent this, because it wasn't like he. Another thing is, like, it wasn't like he died immediately. I forget how long it was before he was killed, between the bombing and after. But this was kind of like an ongoing thing to where he was looking into this, and he definitely seemed to imply. Oh, I remember what I was getting at. He said in the letter to his friend that I was either to his ex-wife or to the letter with his friend. That he essentially kind of pointed out that it was weird that the ATF was there before he even got there, and he was one of the first people there. Mm-hmm. So kind of like that prior knowledge aspect I was getting at before. So he kind of immediately was kind of like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, because from the get, kind of like, how are there already people like federal agencies that seem to be responding to this before I responded to this? Right. This makes no sense. And like, already in like full gear, like prepped, like not just like they just showed up in civilian, like they were like in their full on like like
riot gear
like
and
shit's popping off gear. So yeah, that and I'm trying to think what other specific aspects about what he knew. Yeah, there's definitely a lot there. I'm trying to forget. I'm kind of blacking out. Oh yeah. I mean, with him being one of the first people there, a lot of people are like ask like, what could he have possibly seen or known that would be weird? For one, there's that. 2, he got there so quick. One big thing people talk about is once again, this is another one of those ones that it's not a hill I would die on, because this really could go either way, and I wouldn't be surprised. I lean towards there probably were secondary explosives of some sort planted prior, but it's not like integral to my thinking on this story. But there is one thing to where like people think that there probably was planted explosives as well, because there are bombing experts that have said it's a little bit incredulous that this one truck filled with a fertilizer bomb from I forget how many feet it was away from the building. It was in the parking lot, which I don't know if it was like 100, 200 feet away. It somehow basically eviscerated the building almost, basically completely demolished it. It's like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that does a lot, but that's, for me, I find it a little incredulous that it was able to do that extensive amount of damage. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm no bombing expert, but I have seen other bombing experts who have said this seems weird. And there also were, I believe, I want to say 2 eyewitnesses that said they saw something like a week or less prior. They saw people in I want to say it was like the parking garage inside the building or something, where they were planting. It looked like they were putting on putty-like material on different beams and stuff like that, which would suggest like I believe that they call those like plastic C4 or something like that. There are types of explosives that are like almost like putty type thing. And so there may be something to that. I mean, I don't know. A couple eyewitnesses isn't the most solid evidence, but it is highly suggestive. So there is something to that, to where maybe Yiki saw, whether it was unexploded ordnance or whether it was he saw secondary explosions. I don't know. So there's that. There's also researchers who have suggested that he may have gotten, and I don't know specifically what their sources were. I'm just saying these are people who have looked into it, and they seem to believe that he may have gotten his hands on the surveillance tapes, because that's one big aspect of the story, that the surveillance tapes magically all disappeared. And there was something like, I want to say 23 surveillance tapes that showed the Murrah building, and they were confirmed through documents. At least 2 of them specifically would have been able to see the explosion itself and like kind of like the Ryder truck, which that leads to another point. The Ryder truck being John Doe 2. Because there were an insane amount, I can't remember the exact amount, but I believe it was over 20 eyewitnesses that saw a John Doe 2 with McVeigh prior to and shortly after the bombing. So, and I believe even in the Ryder truck, if I remember correctly. So there seemed to have been another individual there with him. So who is this John Doe 2? And that's probably one of the most, like, if you start going down the John Doe 2 aspect, that's probably one of the most bulletproof, like, what the hell is going on here of the whole case, because they almost immediately, there was a nationwide, like, basically manhunt for this John Doe 2, and they made a big deal out of it. And then within like I want to say 3 months they dropped it, but I want to say it was within a month there had been documents that had been found that showed the feds internally had already stopped looking into it. So, and it's like, they put in, then it became, the official story became, nope, there was no John Doe 2, even though there were so many eyewitnesses that had confirmed a John Doe 2, and not only confirmed it, they had also had the artist descriptions that seemed to all match. So it's who is this John Doe 2? I don't know. I mean, there are some people who think some of the other possible associates of McVeigh that are also kind of characters in this larger narrative could be one of them. I know me and Richard Booth, I mean, I more or less just kind of defer to Richard Booth, think none of the guys that we really know of in this story were him, because they don't seem to necessarily match the description. But I mean, it could be. A lot of people think Richard Lee Guthrie might have been. But point being is that the surveillance tapes would have shown, not Richard, I was about to say Richard Lee Guthrie, but John Doe 2 stepping out of the van or with him before it exploded. And that's one of the big things. And why did all these surveillance tapes never get shown? And there's also been confirmed, there was a surveillance tape that was taken by a Fed at one point. This is confirmed. These are sources that are like legit documents that are out there. There was a Fed who tried to sell it to, I want to say it was 60 Minutes, but I might be wrong on that. Some large media institution. They tried to sell the surveillance tapes to them for, I believe, $800,000, and they didn't take it. Instead, they essentially ratted them out to the feds. And they actually screened. He performed a screening where he actually showed it to them. So it was shown, and I don't remember if it says in there that they actually saw that stuff, but yeah, they've kept a lock on that super hard, and magically these things all disappeared. So why? I don't know. I mean, it seemed, and I believe it's almost beyond a shadow of a doubt there was a John Doe 2. Like, you can't have, I know eyewitness reports aren't the most believable, but when you get to a certain level of stacking up, it gets to where it's like, okay, like they're one of the John Doe 2 people was like the people at the Ryder truck place themselves, the one where they picked it up. They explicitly described McVeigh, and they explicitly described the individual with him. So it's like, they're just going to weirdly imagine a second person that was never there. Like, come on, like that's pushing it. It's one thing to not imagine someone, but to describe someone slightly different, or to get certain aspects of a story wrong as an eyewitness, but to imagine to concoct a human being in your mind, out of thin air is a different thing entirely.
Yeah. So holy shit. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting coincidences. And to me, it almost seems like they put out this manhunt for John Doe too, to distract from perhaps maybe some of the cracks in the foundation that were the OKC bombing, and say, hey, we're looking for this guy because he was part of the bombing, but though all the once again shady shit that's going on over here, don't pay attention to this, let's look for this guy. And then after a couple of weeks, let's be honest, nobody's going to give a shit about it, everybody's moved on, so then you can drop it, and then everybody kind of carries on life as usual.
My suspicions are actually more likely what happened is, I think if you look at like institutions like an FBI or CIA, I think you need to think of them as not a monolith. So I think what likely happened, is my opinion, is they don't work together like a monolith, like I said. And if this was some sort of operation, or if there were informants or people in the know or whatever, even if they didn't intentionally do this, say it was like say there were informants and they were kind of manipulating McVeigh, or they were just trying to entrap him, and say he went rogue or plans changed or whatever, say it just went wrong. Like I think there's a good chance that they don't communicate well with each other. And I think what likely happened is that the law enforcement did what it would naturally do in a situation like that, and reacted the way it would, collected evidence, just like in a genuine way, did all these things. And then, like I said, within that like month, and then I don't know if someone got to someone within the agency and was like, hey, we're gonna drop this. What's going on here? Like, it's something like that. Because I don't think it's not like this entity that works in unison perfectly. That would be my guess. That's my suspicion personally, that it was something more along those lines. That they genuinely were looking for a John Doe too, and then it didn't take too long before maybe certain memos got sent between certain high power individuals between there. They started telling the lower level agents like, hey, drop this. We're cease looking into this, blah, 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 blah. And then a couple months later, kind of officially, we're like hand waved it away. That way it wasn't too suspicious, since they had made such a big deal out of it. That would be my suspicion. I don't know. I mean, I seem to be, my guess is, personally, if I had to guess, I think John Doe 2 was likely an informant or a Fed of some sort. So if I had to guess, but I could be wrong. Once again, that's not like essential to the story. I mean, there's still like more to it, and there are different ways to interpret these facts that are seen. Either way, no matter what, all these facts do not look favorably upon the government at all. At the very least, I'm of the opinion that at the absolute very least, it was 100. It's like undeniable there was a massive cover up. But now, like, were they responsible? I don't know. I lean towards they were.
Right.
So,
Okay, so let's see if I retain this well enough, because we've been shooting the shit for an hour. I can't believe it, dude. It fucking flew by.
Yeah, this is why I did like over 10 hours on it. Like, there's still more.
Right. Okay. Well, so basically the official narrative is that Timothy McVeigh is a radical militia kind of guy, and he wanted to get revenge on the feds, so he went and blew up the Murr building, which they leave out, and I'm guessing in the official narrative, that the ATF agents weren't there, right? So, but what you're proposing is, and all the research that you and Richard have done, would basically suggest
Richard's done, but yeah, go on.
Sorry. Credit where it's due. Yeah. And then, also you got a lot of eyes on it. So, of course, always credit to you as well. So, the narrative that you guys seem to, I don't want to say push, because that almost sounds like negative, but what you guys would say is basically that it's possible that Timothy McVeigh had some kind of federal assistance, and that there was definitely a cover-up of some sort that would allow the ATF agents to not be there, but kind of whip up a mass hysteria by doing this kind of bombing, at the collateral price of children and other people in the building. And then John Doe 2 was potentially a informant as well, but the official like narrative kind of bleeps out that part of John Doe 2. Like it was kind of like here and gone and not a big deal. I know that's not perfectly concise, but would that kind of summarize that in your view?
Yeah, that seems about right. I'd say,
Sure.
like, if we're going to give the most favorable, in my opinion, interpretation of the facts of this case, I think the absolute most favorable, and even then, I think this is being a little bit naive, but if I'm giving the most favorable interpretation I possibly can, is I think they likely probably had informants in some places, and so there probably was some level of a cover-up. I don't know, maybe John Doe 2 was an informant that went rogue and for some reason was acting out of pocket essentially, and they wanted to cover up any sort of dirt on their hands type thing. That it could be that simple, and it could be that this wasn't actually the intended consequence of what they were doing.
Sure.
I lean towards it likely was, personally, once you start digging into other things, but it also, like, that is not something I necessarily assert. That's just my
Your opinion.
that's my speculation.
Yeah.
But like I think it's basically damn near like there was at very least a cover up, and they definitely had it's just once you start accumulating different other individuals that were involved and things they did, it becomes incredulous to think otherwise, and this was an infiltrated group to some degree. And
Sure.
there were other people that were involved that somehow got off the hook, because the only people who got in trouble were McVeigh and Nichols, and there were other people involved. You had other accomplices to some degree. So
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess now that we kind of covered all that, is there anything else you felt or you feel like is necessary for people to know when kind of learning about this, other than kind of what we already laid out?
I'm trying to think. I guess like so far as like basics, that's good. I mean, there's still so much more. There's Roger Moore, like I alluded to earlier.
Sure.
I mentioned the robbery with Nichols. That robbery was likely completely. It's my opinion, my speculation. I think if you look at what happened there, look at the events of that day, it becomes kind of clear. It almost likely was essentially like a completely borderline staged robbery. Like essentially, it was almost because Roger Moore and McVeigh had a semi-long relationship, and also like they had been going to gun shows for a while. They would split booths. They had a long going relationship. I believe I want to say Roger Moore kind of like kind of downplayed their relationship to some extent, but it also was like it just was all too convenient that these were buddies and he had all this stuff. And then when you add in the fact that Roger Moore has a long history of Fed involvement. Like he was essentially, he had a boat company, I believe, if I remember correctly, and he was involved in lots of different Fed ops, like Iran Contra. He was a bagman for other certain like Fed ops, a whole sort of stuff. And there's also there's like I believe articles where he said stuff where he's like said to people that like he's upset that they used his real name because he was operating under an alias at the time, and like he's essentially was like an informant of some sort. There is a lot of lore to Roger Moore, like he glows like the sun, and like there is a lot to him. And the fact that this guy happened to have a ton of guns and a ton of precious metals and stuff that they could rob from him. I'm of the opinion that likely I think Terry Nichols was likely kind of a hapless, like kind of like a guy who got a little bit in over his head type thing. Yeah. And like he was probably one of the few genuine people in a way. Like I actually think if he knew kids were probably going to be killed, I actually think he probably wouldn't be okay with it from the digging I've done with it. I think he's probably one of the more sympathetic of the accomplices of McVeigh. And I think, if anything, he was almost seemed like he was borderline McVeigh's whipping boy. Yeah. And there were definitely a lot of illusions that were made that McVeigh or that Nichols was legitimately scared for his life in this situation. So I think there was probably some level of coercion. That's why I say where he got in over his head, kind of like when you get in a gang and you're like, I no longer want to be, or organized crime. You get deep in organized crime. And if you're like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. You're like, well, sorry. like I
You're
think
here
he
for
got,
good.
yeah, I think he got in over his head.
Yeah.
I think he was worried for his family's safety, and so he just kind of went along to get along. But I think what that was, and I think he was probably one of the people that likely wasn't a Fed or informant or anything like that. I think he just was a genuine person. And I think what happened is because, McVeigh is the one who instructed Nichols to go rob from him. And I think what that was a plausible deniability aspect to where Roger Moore can be like, oh, I was robbed. And he's not lying. He was robbed. And incidentally, Roger Moore then becomes the star witness against McVeigh in court. So that's weird. There's also Andy Strassmeyer, which is another big part of this, which was he was a dude who was a German national. He was in the German military. He had a dad who was like a high-powered politician.
What's up, everybody? We're going to take a quick break and tell you about the show's sponsors. We are brought to you by LMNT electrolytes. I've been using this stuff for years, and what I've honestly found is that if I didn't have electrolytes before some kind of cardio, and sometimes even before workouts, that my workout performance, or definitely cardio performance, would suffer greatly. Sodium is responsible for every single movement pretty much in your entire body, and let's say you drink a lot of caffeine, like I like to do, then maybe it is a good idea, like I do every single morning, put some LMNT chocolate electrolytes there in your coffee to get a little bit more sodium, potassium, and magnesium in your coffee, so that way whatever diuretic effect you get from the caffeine is pretty much diluted by the fact that you put chocolate salt in it. Also, it tastes really, really good. Get some chocolate cream or hazelnut cream or even coconut, and mix that all up. It tastes really, really good. So yeah, make sure you drop by, go to drinklmnt.com/inlibertyandhealth and pick you up some electrolytes today. All right, guys, thanks. All right, unfortunately, I'm not cured of my connectivity issues. So anyways, you were talking about the one gentleman being a German police officer, and then we're going to get into some real spicy stuff because you mentioned the IDF, so I'm excited.
All right, I'll recap it because I don't know exactly where he dropped. He wasn't a German police officer, to be clear. I think I know where I dropped off, but just for the sake of like keeping it all together, he was a German national. Like he was a German citizen essentially. High-powered father. This is Andreas Strassmeyer, Andy Strassmeyer. He was a kid of a high-powered politician. He was in the German military. He was trained in counterintelligence. He also was in when I say in the IDF, I don't mean he was literally in it. He basically, it was almost seemed like a cross-training type deal is what it seemed like. He was essentially on their security patrol for a while with the IDF, kind of like working with them. He then ended up, for some reason, ended up coming to the United States. The first person he lived with, I need to get this name because I mention this occasionally. The first guy he lived with was a quote unquote former CIA agent, who incidentally worked on this, who was in his time in Vietnam, he was part of Operation Phoenix, which Operation Phoenix was essentially Operation Northwoods, but in Vietnam. So if anyone knows Operation Northwoods, that was a thing with JFK, or during JFK's administration, where they essentially proposed to the Joint Chiefs of Staff the idea of essentially doing false flag attacks on the United States citizenry to be able to gin up wartime fervor against Cuba. And the lore is that JFK slapped it down. There also is something called Operation Gladio that happened over in Europe. I want to say Italy. I forget exactly where. Might not be, but somewhere in Europe, where essentially was Operation Northwoods executed, actually done, where they did that type stuff. So, if you ever really want to go down that rabbit hole, go look into Operation Gladio. But Operation Phoenix was that in Vietnam. It's a little known thing, and that is essentially what that guy did. They specialized in assassinations, bombings, anything to gin up. I forget the exact objective, but they were trying to gin up something towards some desired target. Trying to whip up the populace. And that's what that CIA agent, what he was, what he used to do. And he had made comments before about wanting to do stuff like this over in the States. never specifically saying what he meant or what objective, but kind of just a good little anecdote for the story, considering that's who Andy Strassmeyer ended up getting shacked up with for a period of time, where he came over here, and then he ended up going over to another one. I want to say the dude's name's David Holloway. I need to rewatch that episode with Richard Booth so I can get the names correctly. But he ended up living with another CIA agent, or former CIA agent, quote unquote, because I don't know, it seems weird. But this former CIA agent just so happened to have started a militia in Texas, and this militia was Andy Strassmeyer ended up being a part of. And then shortly after, Andy Strassmeyer got booted out of said militia because the people in the militia thought he was some sort of provocateur, because I forget the exact story, but essentially they tailed him and saw him doing very fishy behavior. I want to say it was something like going to some sort of federal building and, just weird behavior like that. They followed him and then kicked him out. And then he ended up in Elohim City, the compound I told you about that, McVeigh seemed to frequent, and a lot of the other people that are kind of associated with this whole story end up being at, which was the white supremacist militia compound. And he ended up becoming the security director. Now, Strassmeyer, I believe, only confirms one interaction with McVeigh, but there are multiple ones that are basically, they're pretty strong. I'll say that. You can go watch my episode or go look into the sources to see more, but they clearly had some sort of relationship. And this guy was involved, Andy Strassmeyer. Also during this period of time, Andy Strassmeyer was receiving a $2,000 a month in the mid 90s. So you could probably figure that out. I don't know what you adjusted for now, but it's essentially a stipend of some sort from the previous CIA agent that he was living with in Texas. So I mean, you could almost borderline say there you go. He's basically pretty much getting paid by the CIA. Although I don't know, maybe he was that good of buddies. They just gave him $2,000 every month. I
wish I had buddies like that.
Yeah, right. That'd be dope. Yeah. So, and then that guy ended up getting mixed up with this whole thing. And yeah, that Andy Strassmeyer is probably one of the biggest glowies of all of them. I know one of the big things is the Godiva, at the strip club where they were all spotted together, and they made weird statements to a stripper there. I forget that. It's a good one to go check out that episode. I highly suggest it. But yeah, there is a lot of weirdness to this case and a lot of glowing things. So yeah,
it looks like a toddler's 4th of July or something like that, with a whole bunch of little glow sticks. Jesus Christ, dude. Yeah. Well, I think I'm definitely gonna check out that series now, because this is just something that I heard you talk about, and people have praised you often for. So I figure getting it straight from the horse's mouth, no offense, would be awesome.
So, and I will say, I the one I'm dropping, I didn't touch on any of that from today. The one I'm dropping is about another person who was suicided, Kenneth Trenadu, who was essentially seemed to have been mistaken for one of the during that period of time where they're looking for John Doe 2. They seem to think he was John Doe 2 or what was his name, Guthrie, one of the other associates of Richard Lee Guthrie of McVeigh, likely one of the accomplices. And he was in jail at the time. He had just gotten picked up for a parole violation crossing the Mexican border. He was driving. Basically, he fit the description perfectly of what they were looking for. He had basically the same, a similar pickup truck. He had a similar tattoo. He had been busted for bank robbery before, because a big part of the whole Elohim City thing is these guys were performing bank robberies to be able to fund their operations. Right. And this guy had been busted for bank robbery years prior. Now, he was supposedly a model inmate. He had basically he had a heroin addiction. He was a Vietnam vet who got addicted to heroin while he was in Vietnam. He came out, I guess he ended up robbing a bank, probably to fund his addiction. He got busted, and it seemed to be he was getting his life together. He got married, he had a newborn, and then he got busted for a parole violation crossing the Mexican border, which, because his wife, I believe, was Mexican-American or so she had family there or something. There was something along those lines where he was there. And they were suspecting that, this individual they were looking for during this John Doe 2 search was someone who'd be crossing the John Doe border. So he checked every one of these marks of people, of a suspected, one of the people are looking for. And then he ended up committing suicide. They found him hanging from a bedsheet in a like a, I believe it's called the shoe is what they call it, but one of those like one of the areas of the prison that was more kind of I forget what the term for it, but it's like more restricted, where they put those kind of like almost where you put like a Jeffrey Epstein kind of thing. Basically, point being, he shouldn't have been able to kill himself. He was in a cell that shouldn't have been a thing. But lo and behold, he had extensive cuts, burns, bruises, ligatures all over him, and they ruled as a suicide. And there were also two fellow inmates who said they heard screaming and sounds of what sounded like torture. And those two individuals magically ended up dead. One of an OD, one of a other suicide. They were willing to testify to this, and they died shortly after. The big thing about Kenneth Trentadue, though, is, don't get me wrong, it's awful that happened, but he is what essentially has led to, in a roundabout way, a lot of the things we have found out. They have come out through like FOIA requests and stuff like that. A lot of the information that has leaked out that has, essentially strengthened the case in this whole OKC story is because of that. Because they just so happened to kill the wrong inmate. This guy's brother was a lawyer, Jesse Trentadue, and he is like the OKC guy. He has been essentially since then been fighting the federal government. He still is. He's actually in court right now, still fighting his FOIA lawsuits against them. And Jesse Trentadue, he was enraged, and he still is to this day, that they clearly killed his brother, and he's been fighting them. And he actually didn't even know it was OKC related at all at first, until he actually, multiple things. One of the biggest ones is he, essentially heard from Timothy McVeigh himself, that contacted him, before he died, of chemical injection, from the death penalty. Timothy McVeigh contacted him and let him know, like, hey, I think they thought he looked like Richard Lee Guthrie, and because he kind of looks just like him, fits all the specific things, and I think they were probably torturing for information. And this is what he told him, which was also, once again, is also kind of an implicit admission from McVeigh that there were other accomplices in a certain way. Which, mind you, keep that in mind. I think that's important to remember. And he said, I think the FBI were, picked him up for that. And, that's probably what happened. And that's, kind of what set him down that road. And then he kind of, most of it really was just him trying to get justice for his brother. But in order to do that, he kind of had to go into the OKC stuff. And so he's the guy who found out a lot of that information I was spouting about the surveillance tapes earlier, about the specific amount. These are like things he's been able to pry from the federal government's hands. Like the way FOIA lawsuits or FOIA requests are supposed to work is they're supposed to just give it to you. It's not supposed to be this hassle. This guy has spent decades fighting this fight, and just to get stuff that they're supposed to give you. And it's funny. One of the reasons that he was able to continue this fight is because in one of his, I believe this is because he didn't just go the FOIA one. He attacked it from the criminal element. He tried to criminally prosecute them, because there was a whole bunch of fuckery in this. There were people that admitted to perjury and all sorts of stuff in the case. Like, I believe the guards admitted to perjury, and so I don't remember if it was them he was trying to get for criminal, but essentially he attacked it from a criminal way. He attacked it politically. Like, he had friends that were involved in politics. He tried to go that way, who then also weirdly got kowtowed into backing down. He attacked it from a civil lawsuit perspective, and then also from the FOIA way. And in the civil one, I believe he ended up, and they all kind of worked together, because he'd get information from one that he'd work for another, and blah, blah, blah. And from the civil one, he ended up getting $1 million granted to him by the federal government. And I think what they probably thought is like, fine, maybe he'll go away. We got him $1 million. He won the civil lawsuit. Like, all right, fucking go away. And like, if anything, now I have $1 million. Like, he actually said himself, now we're armed and dangerous. And he's still fighting that fight to this day. And there's actually, in that episode I told you about earlier that's dropping tomorrow, or for those who watch this when this comes out, it'll already be out. In the video description, I put a presentation Jesse himself gave about roughly 10 years ago. He lays it out, all of this out in there better than I did. or even probably in the episode we did. I definitely highly suggest checking that out because yeah, he said himself that like I'm going to fight this fight to the day I die. He's even knows like no one's probably ever gonna get prosecuted for this, but I will harm the reputation and I will continue to do so till I die.
God.
Yeah, so they killed the wrong dude, and for me, I find they're weird. It's almost like kind of inspirational in a certain way. When you're dealing with these kind of things, these huge conspiracies or these things that seem insurmountable, you never know what domino that will it be that sets them all off, because you would assume, and I'm not saying this to say that that Kenneth Turner was a bad guy. Actually, the more I look into him, the more sympathetic a character he seems. But from a superficial sense, you would think somebody like Yiki, a black cop, was loved by the community. You would think like he was very involved in the community with like the DARE program and all sorts of stuff. You would think that would be what would kick off like the feds getting fucked. But no, they killed an inmate, which I'm sure to them, they just thought, this is just some dude in jail. This is some dude who's a bank robber, former heroin addict. Like, who's going to give a fuck? That's probably what they thought. And they thought wrong. and because of him, because of Jesse Trendu, he's what's like armed a lot of people who are searching for truth in the Oklahoma City bombing to actually be able to find it and to be like have the facts on their side, because there's a lot here. Like this really does run deep, and it's like it's beyond question to me that the federal government has blood on their hands to some level. Now, to what degree, I don't know. Were they actually the perpetrators of the, were they intentionally trying to blow up the Murrah building? Is that where they went to, or was this just some kind of cover up? I don't know. But at the very least, there's blood on their hands.
Yeah, holy shit, dude. It's like drinking from a fucking fire hose. All right, man. I want to be respectful of your time, and I got a lot to process and I got a lot to watch apparently. Jose, always a pleasure, brother. Where can everybody find you?
I have the No Way Jose podcast. It's on YouTube, all the major podcatchers, Odyssey as well. If you want to follow me on Twitter at Tower Gang Jose. I don't think anything else. I mean, if you like offensive comedy, I have the Tower Gang podcast. That's on YouTube. It's on Wednesday at 9/11 every week. And yeah, I think that's really about it. If you want to give me money, patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. But I don't really have any other plugs. I do have next week. It's coming out Tuesday. You said. So when this drops, I don't know what time of day you drop it, but I'll be having Addy Ads to talk about the Ohio stuff. He's like an on-the-ground journalist type guy. I'll have him on. That's an episode, like basically next week, both episodes aren't behind the paywall. Most of my episodes are, to where like I will drop them roughly a week or so later, but these will both be live streams. I'll have Addy Ads on Tuesday, talk about the Ohio stuff. And then on Thursday, I have Shane Cashman coming back on, who's the Timcast journalist and who's been caught up in a lot of the Eliza Blue stuff recently. I'm having him on with me, Top Lobsa, and Clint Russell for another Four Pony Boys. This is his return appearance. He's been on before. We all actually really love Shane. So it'll be a great episode, and I hope you guys pop in and check out. I know a lot of people are upset about his coverage with Eliza Blue thing. Pop in, ask questions. Drop some money in a super chat. Ask him. I mean, do the lowest amount. I don't care. I mean, it's just when you have so many comments, it just helps to sift. I'm not doing that to be like greedy. I'm just saying, like, if there's a million comments going on, it makes it a lot easier if there's a super chat to know which ones to address. But if you want to ask him why he did this or why he did that, I seem to I kind of take his side in a lot of ways. So I think a lot of people are misunderstood the situation in a lot of ways from Shane's perspective. But I don't know, whatever. Pop in, put his feet to the fire. I don't care. It'll make for a good episode. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, of course. And definitely go check out the Four Pony Boys episodes. I absolutely enjoyed those a lot. I listened to the one with Dan McBaste and Royce Lopez today, and just absolutely love them. Royce and Dan are both just a freaking howl. So, dude, if you got anything else, we'll close her out.
Yeah, that's it, man. Appreciate it.
Cool, of course.